He was compiling a response to my first message when she received my second one. Debbie never sent that message, but I sometimes wonder what it could have been. Perhaps something like, forget it, blown it, I don't know. But I got away with it, and she wasn't put off by my poor attempt at humour. And here we are 4 years later.
Yeah, it was funny.
I got away with it. Anyway, it's about time I shut up. So I'm going to finish off by proposing a toast to the bridesmaids, Della and Mary. So if you'll all be pleased, but you're standing, and join me in raising a toast to the bridesmaids.
The bridesmaids.
The bridesmaids.
Ladies and gentlemen, repeating you the first best man, Simon.
Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying this very special day so far. It has been an emotional day, Paul. Even the cake's in tears. I'd just like to say a big thank you to Della, the Matron of Honour. I think Della's done a marvellous job in helping Debbie, and she looks absolutely fantastic. Indeed, only eclipsed by Debbie herself, who I'm sure you'll all agree looks absolutely stunning today. On the other hand, Paul just looks stunned. I'd like to thank Paul for asking me to be one of his best men. It truly is an honour. Just listening to you doing your speech there, I feel very proud that you're my mate. When Paul asked me to be a best man, I looked for help and advice on the speech. After a couple of hours searching, I found some really good stuff on the internet, but then I remembered I was supposed to be looking for a best man speech. I know Paul mostly from university, but we were brought up in the same town in Warrington, just a few miles apart, but we went to different schools, so it wasn't till university when we met. We were actually born in Warrington General Hospital. Paul beat me into this world by just one day. This was the first and only time I have known Paul to be early for anything.
I was 2 weeks late. I think it's premature.
It wasn't until we were 18 that we first struck our friendship. This started in Freshers Week at Newcastle University, and there's a few people here from those times at the back of the room. So hi to you. We recognised each other from Warrington. We had some mutual friends. We went for a beer. We talked about football and rugby, and we've been friends ever since. I'd like to thank you for that friendship, Paul. Despite having our upbringing in common, there are a few differences between us, but I only look at these as strengths to Paul and his character. Now, the major difference here is that Paul always looks at the cost of something. Paul is, after all, an accountant. I've many examples of travelling with Paul when only the cheapest accommodation or travel would do. On one such occasion, we did a booze cruise to France and stopped over in Belgium for a few days just to take in the sights. It cost us £10 more to park the car for the night than it did for our accommodation in the youth hostel. It was so cheap we had to share the room with 24 other blokes. I've got to say, Paul, the thought of finding a Frenchman in my bed again at 3 AM, it's been a big motivation to me to work very hard and pay for my own room.
Soon chucked him out though, didn't
you? On a trip to the Far East, we stayed over in Bangkok, throughout the Far East. Throughout the whole trip, whether it was in Hong Kong or whether it was on Koh Phi Phi Island, an island with no roads, we kept losing Paul as he wandered in and out of shops in his daydream manner. On our last day in Bangkok, with only a few hours to go before the plane, Paul, with his relaxed attitude to timekeeping, disappeared. We spent about 20 minutes trying to find him amongst the cheap t-shirts, knockoff DVDs, eventually deciding to head back to the hotel in an air-conditioned taxi for just £3 without Paul. Paul, not to be rushed, by the time or pressure of a flight home, found a slower and much cheaper route using a ferry boat, a train, and for the last mile his legs. All for less than £1. One of Paul's mottos in life could be, if you've paid for it, you eat it. While at university, we ventured out one night for a cheap pizza meal. Now, when you're at university, it's a time in your life when you experiment with things. In Paul's case, he experimented with chilies. The hotter the better. As soon as Paul saw the chili pizza on the menu, his eyes lit up. Another chance to experiment. This time, Paul had more than met his match. The pizza was served covered in chili seeds. You could barely see the cheese or tomato base. On his first mouthful, he exhaled in horror. My eyes were watering just looking at it. Not to be outdone by the chili, or to lose money by not eating the pizza, Paul took his time. In fact, a very, very long time to eat the pizza. They were close to closing the restaurant as he took his last mouthful. I'm told the next day it took even longer for Paul to leave the bathroom. Now, Paul has the ability to act responsibly with money, just like the finest of Yorkshiremen. I know that Paul was one of the first in his family to be born outside of Yorkshire. He was, in fact, born in Lancashire. And so I guess being a Yorkshireman must be genetic. When Paul first introduced Debbie, it did not take me long to realise what a lovely lady Paul had met, but also they were very fond of each other. It came as no shock to me when Paul asked Debbie to move in with him. Paul had not spent any money on his house. He had a somewhat old kitchen and bathroom, to put it politely. To be truthful, it was awful. Debbie informed Paul that to be able to move in, these really needed updating. When Paul actually stumped up all that money, it was clear to me that Paul was head over heels in love and that he saw a long future together. There are many other qualities which I admire about Paul as a man, qualities which I say to Debbie's family and friends should make you feel comfortable that Debbie is in the best of hands. I can say I know of no man with a greater sense of honesty and loyalty than Paul. As lifelong supporters of Warrington Wolves Rugby League team, great expectations built up each year that this year, the first year since Paul and I were born in 1974, that we'll actually win something. Each year, this sense of hope and optimism, it's knocked out of us at a fairly early stage. In fact, this year it was the second game. However, I've got to say, Paul is usually the last to give up hope, and he's always there for his team. And I guess it's these qualities which so endear him now to watch Norwich City. I think since moving to Norwich, Paul's he's integrated well as a northerner coming here, and he's created quite a good circle of friends. Some of those came on the stag party to Magaluf, and I'd like to thank those guys for a really good time. As Paul said, a couple of shandies just sitting by the beach. Yeah. I'd like now to pass you to the other best man, Steve, who can shed more on Paul's life since he got to Norwich.